welcome to another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences. Dr. Steve Wood, back again with me, Bill Kanasky, for part 3 of our viewer-listener mail.
You know, Steve, something just, and I sent you this last week. So everybody's complaining, why is everything so expensive, right? And I got clients going like, oh my God, that price of a mock trial is astronomical. I mean, yeah, it is. But a lot of that we can't control. I mean, we have our professional fee, but then you have expenses. So I'm in California, right? And I sent you the receipt as proof of this.
Yes.
I had my fettuccine Alfredo with chicken, which is fantastic, by the way. And then I'm like, hey, it's been a long week here. I think I'm going to treat myself to some dessert. So I asked the server, I'm like, what do you got? Yeah, I got this brownie thing, then this ice cream. And then they had something, it was like a lemon cake, right? Something like that. I'm like, I really like lemon. Is that any good? He's like, yeah, everybody likes it. I go, let me have it. Bring out the lemon cake. I devoured this lemon cake. It wasn't a small piece, but it wasn't a huge. It was a medium, regular sized piece of cake. Everything was cool. Love it. I get my bill. Steve, I sent you the photograph of the receipt. Yeah. $14. Let me say that again. For a piece of effing cake, $14. My jaw just hit the. I asked the server. I'm like, what you know what I said.
Yeah.
What else do I get with this $14? $14. He just kind of looked at me. He's like, yeah, that's our price. I'm like, $14. Like I went on my chicken wing rant, right?
Yeah.
But Steve, 14 for cake.
I hope it was good. I hope it was worth.
It was good, but I have to submit that. I had to submit that receipt to my client. And they're what the hell are you getting $14 cake? They should have. Remember in Pulp Fiction, $5 shake.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
John Travolta's like $5 shake. Does it have rum in it? Right? I mean, that's his response. They should have named it the $14 piece of cake. Now let's do some math, right? So you're the Hilton, okay? You're running the restaurant at the Hilton. How many pieces of cake do you think are in the? I'm willing to bet it's probably 8, right?
Probably that's probably a good.
Let's say 8. 8 times 14. Wow, they're making some cake profit. I'll tell you that. Right now.
We need to get. We're like I said, as we've come to the conclusion multiple times now on this podcast, you and I are in the wrong business. Apparently,
we are in the wrong business. I'm going over my other rants here. Oh yes. Okay. So I'm on the, this is classic. So I'm on the airplane. You gotta love this. And yes, I happen to be in first class. And the flight attendant comes up to me. So we had just taken off, right? Everything stabilizes and they come around and they're going to take, it's the morning, early flight, and take drink orders. And she goes, sir, what would you like to drink with breakfast? And I said, this is exactly what I said, Steve. I said, I'd like some coffee, black, with a little bit of water as well. I shit you not. Her response was, do you want that water on the side or do you want it in the coffee?
Yikes.
Steve. I another kind of what? So I looked at her, I'm like, I'm sorry. Did you just say that? She's like, well, you never, I thought maybe you wanted it in the coffee. I wasn't sure whether you wanted the water in the coffee or you wanted like a separate glass of water. Then she came back. Of course I picked I teased her. Like I said, no. I want the water in the coffee. Just to mess with her, and she laughed. But she's like, no, I just want to make sure I understood you. I'm like, okay, all right, well. So Steve, the next time you travel, if you are going to have coffee with breakfast on the airplane, and you also want a little, water just to kind of, cleanse the palate, you just may want to be clear that you want those two things separated, right?
Got it.
but yeah, if you're the type of guy that wants water mixed in with the coffee. I mean, by the way, when I go to a law firm and I'm drinking coffee in the morning for witness prep, what's the worst thing in the world? Watered down coffee. It's the worst, right?
Yeah.
Oh God. Don't get me started. Don't get me started. Okay, back to viewer and listener mail. We still got plenty of good stuff here. Okay, guys, what are your voir dire recommendations for federal court when maybe you have 30 to 60 minutes to ask questions to jurors? Oh man, this is rough. This is really rough.
My recommendation is identification, because you always talk about identification versus indoctrination.
Yeah.
And I forego, or at least for the most part, forego any sort of indoctrination and go right for identification. And you just got to be surgical of sorts with the questions that you're asking to identify essentially those jurors that you want to strike, rather than goofing around about talking about burden of proof and does anybody think because we're here we must have done something wrong and blah blah blah, all that stuff.
I think a general strategy to use when you're time limited like that is you gotta answer questions where people raise their hands and get many answers at once. And work through those. Like, if you have a veneer of 35, you can't. Okay, well, let's start with juror number 1 and work. Well, no, you're gonna blow all your time. I think you have to ask a question. Who agrees with this? Raise your hand. And then the people that raise their hand or don't raise their hand, you go through them and question them one-on-one, and you better do it quick. Can you also talk about the impact of how a supplemental juror questionnaire can help alleviate some of the pain in this very process?
Yeah, that's actually another good option to use to cut down time. And you can use it as, part of the argument to the court is that you're using it as a way to keep court efficient and be able to ask those questions. So I think that's another way for you to ask and get feedback that you wouldn't have to ask in an open court. And going back to what we talked about on the last podcast about social desirability bias, when you're doing it on a supplemental juror questionnaire, you're tending to get more than likely, you're going to get more accurate responses, at least on that, because it's more private and they don't have to worry about talking about certain topics that might be sensitive. They don't have to worry about talking about them in open court. So I think it's another way too to address those sensitive questions without having to ask everybody. But I think it goes back, another thing that you said, I think I like that not enough attorneys do is do that whole who agrees with juror number 7 and get people to kind of raise their hands. They don't do that. They're like, thanks, juror number 7 for that.
That's the follow-up.
Yeah.
So what you want to do, here's what you want to do. You want to get a juror to agree with something really, really bad towards your case. And then you thank them immensely that they raised their hand. And then you say, well, why is that? Get their rationale for it. And then the next question is, who here agrees with juror number 5? And if one other person raised their hand, boom, there's your second strike. I mean, it's the follow-up of you take the burden off of other people, but you have to be efficient. And plaintiff's counsel is in the same boat. See, that's the thing of federal court. Boy, you do that wrong, you get outmaneuvered in federal court jury selection, you're screwed. I mean, you're screwed. So hand raising questions and then get a couple. And then the moment you hear something bad, you thank that juror for saying something so bad because they're going to be gone. Who else agrees with juror number 5? Please raise your hand and maybe get 2 of them. But I think that's a pretty good philosophy there because time is not on your side. Okay. What is the best way to question my client at trial during direct or rehabilitation examination? I have very strong feelings on this because I'm a big the big believer of primacy, scientifically. I mean, just so important and proven. And when you get your client on the stand and you just blow that first 10 minutes on background, education, what's your favorite color, that's the golden opportunity. You think the jurors want to really hear that shit? No. The first 3 or 4 questions should be about liability. Did you, if it's a med mal case, the first question, did you deviate from the standard of care in this case, doctor? And it should be an emphatic, no, I did not. Look at the jury. You tell that jury right now, why was your care reasonable and appropriate in this case? Go ahead, tell them. That's what comes out of your mouth first.
Right.
Not, where'd you go to med school? And by the way, why did you want to be a doctor? Was this when you were a teenager? Is that when you wanted to be a doctor? Do you like to help people? No. No. You're wasting time. And a lot of times in these cases, your client's been called as an adverse witness. They just got pummeled for the last hour and 15 minutes. And then you get up as defense counsel. You better get on your horse and get going. You do that background stuff in the middle someplace. But I mean, Steve, you agree with me that you got to come out firing. You can't be waiting on what the jury's dying to hear, right?
Yeah, I think to your point, yes, you got to come out quick. And I think that's the thing you and I always preach all the time is nobody comes right out of the chute firing right off the bat. It's taking the time and, warming them up. But I will say though, because I know, now that I haven't seen any of these viewer questions, I'm going to ask you a question right here and put you on the spot because I know somebody's going to end up asking us, but Bill, don't I need to spend time? Don't I need to humanize my witness? Don't I need to find a way for my witness to engage and come across as credible with the jurors? And if I don't do that background stuff at the front end, I'm going to miss my opportunity, or they're not going to like my client or feel like my client is credible until later.
No. Hell no. Because they've been determined to be credible or not well before they've gotten on the stand, which I want you to talk about in a second. Through their body language, their facial expression, their general courtroom behavior is a huge factor in credibility and humanization. Okay. Secondly, all that stuff, all that mushy stuff you want to talk about, okay, put that in the middle of your questioning. You take a break from the case. Let's take a step back, Doc, or whoever or if it's the CEO, whoever. Then, you do that kind of touchy-feely type of question in the middle. But when they've been pummeled on the stand for the last hour and a half before you get up, and now it's your chance to rehab this witness, you better not start off mushy or you're going to be in trouble. Steve, talk a little bit about the impact of nonverbal communication and how it relates to credibility well before your client even gets on the stand.
Yeah, I think that's one of the other, that people don't spend enough time talking about. It's the nonverbal, as we've always said, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I think that's so important about when witnesses are testifying, especially in open court, that, I always like to talk about being consistent across your testimony, both in, cross and direct, cross or redirect, and making sure that you don't do anything, you don't say anything with some sort of snark or tone in your voice that's going to cause jurors to go, uh-oh, something's going on here. Something's interesting is happening. And now all of a sudden you've called into question your credibility, or you've made yourself look bad. And I think the other thing, as far as not even just, tone and inflection in your voice, but also the eye contact that you're making with jurors, how your body is sitting. Are you swiveling in the chair? Are you looking at the jurors constantly, like they did in the Johnny Depp case, where Amber Heard was always looking at the jury on every single answer, which just was freaking people out. There's kind of an art to doing it to help build your credibility. And I think instinctually most people don't understand how to do it, and they get up there and fidget and fumble, do a lot of other things, like you said, because jurors are constantly always looking for tells, looking for things to get additional pieces of information out of your witness. And it's not just, like I said, how they're answering it, but there's a lot of other aspects that they're looking at. Most of the time, witnesses don't pay attention to that. And before you know it, some juror doesn't find them to be credible because they were looking up to the left or looking up to the right. When we know all that stuff doesn't really mean anything, doesn't matter whether it does or it doesn't. Jurors think that it does. And jurors think because you did it, somehow you're being untruthful. So I think there's a lot of things from the nonverbal behaviors that people don't understand.
And also on adverse examination, a witness can come across as a really good human being if they're trained appropriately and they know how to play the chess. I mean, that's what we train them to do. They can be very, very likable, right? Or they could be taught to pivot. Here we go. See?
Oh God.
Here we
Not the
go.
pivot
Yeah,
rant.
but yeah, but yeah, but yeah, but yeah, but yeah, but yeah, but right.
Yeah.
And then they come across like a clown on the stand where they can embrace. Listen, there's two ways to deal with conduct during cross-examination. You defend your conduct or you embrace your conduct. What do you think the jurors want? Well, jurors don't like defensive people. Every time you're with, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but. Every but that comes out of their mouth, all you're gonna hear this in the background. Cha-ching, cha-ching. And that's just the verdict going up. Cha-ching, cha-ching. You know, isn't it true you did X? The witness looks right at the jury and says, absolutely, I did. They own it, believe in it, and the jury will believe in you. Yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but. Stop blaming the refs, right?
No, I think that's before we move on, I think that's a perfect, I think that's a perfect thing for you to say, is that there are ways on cross-exam to come across as credible. You don't have to wait
Yeah.
for redirect to come
No.
across as credible.
No, I think
that's
the
the
die's
take-home.
been cast. Yeah, well before then. All right, next question. This is great. This is a great question. Are engineers bad jurors for the defense? I know you have some opinions on this one, because there's quite a few engineers out there, at least people with engineering training, and they get on juries. What are your thoughts on this one? Because I think there's this assumption that, wait, if they're analytical and they're very logical and they're math driven, like that's a defense juror. As Lee Corso says, not so fast, my friend.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think they can be, I mean, just because they're engineers, you know, I mean, they are analytical, they are methodical in their thought process. The problem becomes, though, they're human beings, and at the end of the day, they may be highly emotional, hyper emotional individuals. So now you have somebody
methodically hit you with the nuclear verdict, right? Methodically.
Yeah, they get in there, and the thing what makes them dangerous, right, is they are analytical. They are very thorough, so they can, you know, they can articulate the arguments to their other jurors, and they may end up being the foreperson. And now you have this highly emotional, very articulate, very thoughtful, very analytical person who is, like you said, going to walk down the list and just bang, bang, bang on the defense. So
so I did a mock trial about a month ago up in Pennsylvania, and one of the jurors, unknown to us, because on their juror pro, they weren't an engineer, they were doing something else, but they had I think they started off in engineering and then switched majors in college, right? So they had enough engineering background to be dangerous. It was a product liability case for a piece of machinery, and during the deliberations, this guy was the foreperson, and we just sat back and said, "Yeah, I've taken 4 engineering classes. Boy, they really botched the design of this project." I was like, "Oh God." Oh my God. Oh, absolutely killed us, right? And you would think, well, hey, you know, many of our witnesses are engineers, right? Well, if you have an engineer juror, well, hell, they're going to side. No, they could be your word. It's kind of like a nurse or a doctor in a med mal case, right?
Yeah.
If they're on it cuts both ways. It's super, super dangerous. Like anything else, I'm thinking they need to be evaluated very, very carefully. I think if you had a product liability case with a piece of equipment, an engineer could make it's really, really risky.
Yep, absolutely.
What a great question. Oh, you'll like this one, Steve. What types of demonstrative exhibits work best with jurors? Should I always go high tech? This question comes up a lot.
I would say no. High tech isn't always, because I think it goes. I mean, we talked about this before.
Yeah.
Length does not imply strength. Or you don't have to do these. I mean, so many times people are like, I want this to be very complex. I want this to have all these bells and whistles. And, you know, the problem is sometimes simple is better. Sometimes concise is better.
Simplicity. And by the way, Steve, when things get high tech and complex, you know my just hatred towards complexity. You're increasing the statistical odds that something's going to go wrong with your technology. I don't know if you've seen that in a courtroom before. It's not pretty. I was working on a federal case in Cleveland. Okay. I can't tell you what case is. It was a $7 billion case, okay, commercial litigation, and the plaintiff team went to start their opening, right? They couldn't get their system to work.
Mm.
So the guy abandons ship and gives this opening with no slides, no nothing, no nothing. It didn't work out so well.
Wouldn't figure. But I think partly the reason why people like to do this high tech, they think people want it. The other reason why is I think for some people, it actually takes time to simplify things. I mean, I've
Yeah.
sat before with engineers and I've had them try to explain things to me and I go, don't get
Huh?
it. Explain it
Yeah.
again. And then they do it and I
Yeah.
said, still don't get it.
Still
Explain
don't
it
get it.
again. And I make them go over and over and over again until it's the most precise, concise, and simplified explanation, because you know what? All your jurors aren't going to be engineers and all of them might not be able to follow the high tech aspects of it. If you can simplify it, then you can make a very persuasive argument, very simple. Everybody gets it. And like I said, but the problem is it's hard to do because people don't want to make it simple because it takes refining. And that's what you got to do though.
And this is scary. I think you're going to agree with me. This is terrifying, but I think it's true. Simplicity will beat accuracy every time. It will.
Yeah.
Jurors believe the simple solution and you can be really, really complicated and accurate, and you're going to lose the jury, right? You could be simple and half accurate, and they'll believe everything you say. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, because it's easy for them to integrate into their thought process, right? And it's easy for them to articulate rather than go back, like you said, into the deliberation room and spend 45 minutes talking about the animation that they just saw that they don't even understand.
Okay, next question. Oh, this is I hate this question. I hate this question because I get it after every speech, and I know you do too. I really want to hire you guys, but the insurance company is hesitant to approve the expense. What do I tell them? Your adversary is spending money right now preparing to beat you. And we're having this discussion. Now, if you have a case, okay, I'll try to be nice now. If you have a case, maybe the damages aren't too high. It's a real simple, straightforward case. Well, yeah, maybe you don't need us, right? I mean, I get that. But, a case with a 10, 20, $30 million demand, throw in a co-defendant. Now you're talking about apportionment of fault. You're not spending some money to get some jury level answers. I mean, that could have nuclear verdict written all over it, right?
Yeah, I think it goes back to though, you get it. I know you get the question, and I get why. I mean, I sort of get it and don't get why they don't spend the money. But I think it goes back to something that you've said, and I'll let you speak to it because you can speak to it, probably better than I can. But the whole idea when you're talking about how there's that disconnect on the insurance side when they're the ones cutting the check, and then on the attorney side when they win the verdict, right? They don't get to hold the trophy, as you would like to say.
They don't get to hold the trophy. And I think many in the insurance industry, I think it's unfair to them. I think many insurance claims people, there's a lot of pressure to save money.
Right.
And if they lose, it's really not their money, right? It's some other departments paying it out. But what I see with one of the common threads in these nuclear verdicts, which we talk about in our talks and we talked about in the podcast, is the difference in weaponry between the sides. And if it's not a fair fight, your odds of winning I think are pretty diminished. And so I think they need to see it as an investment, right? They need to see it as an investment into winning and not see it as an expense. If everything's just an expense, well then, and you just go cheap with everything. I mean, think about that. I mean, and again, I'm not afraid to say this because I didn't come up with this. I'm just repeating what everybody's told me is if you have a corporation or an insurance company and they're going to go get attorneys on their panel that are discounted half price attorneys and not go after the better defense counsel, I mean, what do you expect when it comes to outcome?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's differences on attorneys, and I'm not saying this happens every time, but I think for the most part, oftentimes you get what you pay for. And if you're gonna, cut back on that, I think it's, every inch. I tell you this though, to kind of put a positive spin on this, we have developed some really, really good relationships as of late with insurance companies that have had enough.
Yeah.
And they want to fight. They're tired. They're sick and tired of getting outmaneuvered. They're sick and tired of losing. And you want to know what's been the C-level executives at the company have called the claims department, right? And said, enough is enough. Spend the money, damn it. Go out and win. I mean, and so we're seeing a lot of change there with some pretty aggressive insurance companies that said, yeah, we're going to spend this money. And the other good thing is we're going to spend it early. We're not doing this on the eve of trial when discovery's closed and we don't have, no, they're doing a lot of, I just got off a call, a 2-day focus group down here in Florida. There's no trial date yet, but they know this case has potential high. I want answers now because I can do something about it. Experts still haven't even been deposed. Well, if you know how a jury feels, right, about your case and discovery is still open, you have a lot of power.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than, when you and I spend, a large period of time writing these analysis reports, and I come up with all these ideas for, we can create this type of demonstrative, we can do this, we can do that. And then the attorney goes, that's great, discovery's closed. Then it's like, all right, never mind. Guess we can't do that. So like you said, you hinder yourself from any sort of additional weaponry to be able to do that.
Yeah. So I think, again, I know I was a little harsh earlier and I get blamed for bashing.
In the defense of the claims specialist sides, right? There's a lot of them out there who want to spend the money that just can't, right?
And they can't. But I do think they need to evaluate it on a case by case basis. But I think there's just some obvious circumstances in which if you don't spend money to defend the case and get some real answer and giving your trial team weaponry to use, I think you're putting your trial team in a really bad position. Dear guys, I love this. If my witness has an emotional meltdown during the deposition, what can I do to get them back on track? I think, Steve, you know the answer to this.
Take a break. That's the first thing.
Yeah, good luck with that. I would say this: if you see your witness's temperature and blood pressure starting to elevate, you better take a break and yank him out of the room before there's the meltdown. I think this is saying, I think the question is post meltdown, what can you do?
You're screwed. I would
argue you better cancel the dep, if anything, because once that amygdala hijack takes over and these witnesses have adrenaline and cortisol going through their blood, through their veins, I mean, that's a 3 to 6 hour neurochemical effect. I mean, you're not just going to calm them down, right?
No, I think that's to your other point too, is, you can't just say, let's take a break and then go into the room for 5 minutes and say, all right, let's take a 5-minute break. Let's cool down and go back. And, your witness might tell you that they're feeling okay and that they're ready to go back in. But as you said, from a physiological standpoint, they're not, and if I'm opposing counsel and that happens, I'm going back at them again, right? Because as I always like to talk about, it's like road rage as far as how it would be is if someone cut you off and you had road rage and then, you're amped up and then imagine it happens again and imagine it happens again and imagine it happens again in succession. That's what I would be doing too, is once I know that you're having these emotional meltdowns, you're not getting off the hook because now I'm just going to keep the pedal to the metal. And now I'm going to continue causing you these emotional meltdowns because I know essentially that you're not going to have enough time to recover because that recovery period is so long.
It's so long, and that brain's going to maintain fight or flight for hours and hours. I mean, Steve, let's go to the baseball analogy, right? When the pitcher in the game has an emotional meltdown and that coach walks out to the mound, as well as I do, giving that break, that little conference is not about calming the pitcher down. It's over. That conference is about getting the bullpen warmed up, right?
Right. Yeah. There's not about, you think you can go, take a deep breath. You think you can go another 3-4 hitters? No, to your point, it's already past the point. I think that's the other
Yeah.
thing too about the witnesses having these emotional meltdowns is to your point is if you see it happening before it's about to happen, you better take a break. I think the fact of the matter is though, and we and I preach on this all the time and written papers on it about never letting it get there in the first place by identifying those emotional hot buttons of your witnesses so that you know what those are before you go into the deposition. Because how many
Yeah.
times have we heard horror stories where there's things that come up or topics that get touched on that the witness isn't prepared for, or that even the attorney didn't even know it was an issue or didn't think it was going to be an issue with that witness. Then they find out after the fact. I think it goes to a prep on the front end too, to have an understanding of your witness, their hot button issues, so that you don't even have to worry about it in the deposition because it's not going to happen because you've prepared for it.
No, very, very good point. All right, next question. This is a very tricky one, but you and I deal with this all the time. How should I test evidence in a mock trial format if I'm not sure if the judge is going to let it in or not?
Put it in.
Hmm.
Put it in
Yeah.
its worst form. And
Yeah.
and if you need to do as we like
Test,
to do,
retest.
the test, retest. Exactly. Try it with it in, try it with it out. But I think what you need to do is, is you need to for sure assume that it's coming in and test it that way versus the other way. Like I said, the worst case, you do a test, retest, or if you only have one crack at it and you're only going to be able to do it once, you got to do it with it in and get the reaction of the jurors.
Well, we have this case out west that you're working on where there's a disagreement, right? Between the legal team and the client on how to do things because they're not sure what's going to happen. But I guess it's, assume the worst. And then if it works out in your benefit, okay, you can make some adjustments. But if it works out against you, then you've tested the worst, right?
Exactly. Yep. And that's a good way to take it.
Okay, next question. How do I deal with a defendant who is experiencing extreme guilt and wants to admit fault, even though they didn't do anything wrong and it was an honest accident? That's a tough place to be.
That's going to be, like you said, that's going to be, and then once again, going back to training and prepping the witnesses for deposition and getting and having a conversation with them and identifying how, despite the fact that they may feel guilt and all that type of stuff, to alleviate them of those concerns prior to deposition, so that when they get into deposition, they feel more confident and comfortable with their conduct, and not feeling like they're going to fall on the sword. And then also having an understanding that, by doing that, that's great. You alleviate some of that burden. The problem is now you've essentially changed the tenor and the whole thing of the case. Because you go into the deposition and fall on the sword for something that you didn't need to. While I can appreciate it and understand where somebody's coming from, the truth of the matter is it's not necessary, and especially not in a deposition, for you to do that. And I think, like I said, just going back to understanding and educating that witness about what it means for the case, but also spending time with them to get them to understand that it's not actually as bad as it sounds, or they're not as at fault as what they believe they should or are.
Yeah. That's another good thing to cover right now. The difference between could have, should have, and would have. This is a big part, a very important part of our witness training system. And that needs to be broken down because witnesses don't really understand this. And it's really, really important because these questions are very, very different questions, right?
Yeah.
Could have merely means possibilities. Okay. Steve, you could have gotten the breakfast tacos, but instead, you got the breakfast burrito. I could have gotten the breakfast, right? It's a possibility, right? And with defendants, there's always going to be you could have done these other things, right? And could have, in the most cases, it's generally a possibility. Doesn't hurt you. It sounds terrible, but doesn't hurt you. So the could haves, that's where a lot of people get worried. No, it's a possibility. Okay.
Yeah.
You can agree to most could haves because that doesn't mean you should have, right? Now, should have implies you blew it. You made the wrong decision. You made the wrong decision. You made a mistake. Should have. So if the phrase should have comes out, That's going to be a no. You say yes to a should have, that's typically an admission of liability in many cases, right? And then would have, that's really speculation, right? That's crystal ball stuff. That's going back and, Marty McFly going back in the DeLorean. Well, if you would have gone back 4 years and, did X instead of Y, then that would have prevented this whole, well, I don't know. That's impossible to know. And I think a lot of witnesses get caught up in those differences. And so that's part of our training system, is to train their brain how to differentiate between those questions, because they are really different, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah. And the implications are much different. And all the underlying tenets of it are all different as well.
Absolutely. Okay. Are you ready for one? You do one more, right?
I got one more. Yeah.
Okay. This, okay. I like this. I have several more here, but I'm going to pick out one. I'm going to give this to you. As a jury consultant, does a juror's health status matter to you? Now, we have a lot of people out there, Steve, in the general population that, suffer from chronic illnesses, right? You have COPD, you have diabetes, you have people, that are obese and don't take care of themselves. You have all kinds of kind of health issues that they're not bad enough to keep them out of a courtroom as a juror, right?
Yeah.
And what do those mean to you as a jury consultant when it comes to jury selection?
Well, what it tends to mean is a lot of times we see it as it ends up being a little bit more of skewed towards pro plaintiff type personalities. They're the type of people who kind of always have these significant life events, always have something going on with them, always the type of person who essentially always has a problem. When you're asking them, hey, Bill, how you doing today? Rather than saying, man, I'm good. It's all of a sudden, wow, my back hurts. And I swear I went to the doctor, and the doctor doesn't tell me anything. He's not telling me anything. I'm always constantly in pain. The guy doesn't know what he's talking about. The guy's a
chronic pain. That's another one.
Yeah.
Fibromyalgia. Those are generally bad for the defense. They are. And then they also tend to, in some cases, particularly in personal injury, tend to have sympathy for someone else that's been injured, because and I mean how many cases are you part of, Steve, where part of the damages is pain and suffering, right? And so I do think health status in many cases. Now, I do think also there's a difference, and sometimes you don't know this, sometimes you do, whether it's more of a behavioral issues, right, causing a health condition versus something the person has no control over. Somebody has type 1 diabetes. Well, you're born with that. Type 2 diabetes is a behavioral based disease, right? I mean, there's stuff like that. So I tend to want jurors that kind of care about themselves. I like jurors that eat right and exercise. And I think that's part of the discussion you have with them during voir dire, assuming it's not federal court. We talked about that. But if you have time to get to know, what are your do you exercise? How would you rate your own health? We have questions like that on our questionnaires, but you can ask those questions, And I think people that tend to be healthy, they're into, whether it be fitness or diet or yoga or meditation or whatever, and they value their own health. I think that's a positive. I don't think it's a predictor of outcome, but I do think it's people that don't take care of themselves give me, because I think that's an indicator of poor judgment too, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think one of the other things I was thinking about, though, to add kind of onto this, and I'd be curious on what your thoughts are, as far as we'll probably hear some people say, like, well, I've heard people say, well, I've been injured, or I've been sick, or I've had bad outcomes, and I haven't got a large settlement. So why should this person get a large amount of money? So then now all of a sudden you have the flip side of the person who's having these health issues or has these chronic problems, essentially being more pro defense. I mean, what are your kind of thoughts on that? I mean, does it go back to really more or less just having to identify and ask more questions and get more information?
More questions, more information. It does show, and I'm glad that we talked kind of that difference between state court and federal court. I mean, Steve, trial is risky. You could have the best case. You've mock tried it 5 times. All your witnesses are ready, and you get a bad panel that day, and
Yeah.
you can only do so much. So there is a level of risk there, but I think you do have control by being able to do your jury research, come up with a pro plaintiff or a high damages juror profile, right? But the one thing we can't control, and the one thing the clients can't control, hell, the one thing the plaintiff attorneys can't control, they can't control who's showing up that day.
Yeah. I think that's,
yeah. What are you going to
I
do?
think that's the
right?
other thing too, is you think you do all that and then you can just wave a magic wand and make the perfect panel show up. Right. And I think it goes for both ways, whether plaintiff attorney doesn't get the
Yep.
perfect panel or defense attorney doesn't get the perfect panel. It just ends up being, like you said, a crapshoot of who's going to be there on that day.
Yeah. Well, Steve, I enjoyed the viewer listener mail. We'll certainly do this again. I would like to thank our audience. We're getting a lot of really good feedback on the podcast, and I know you are as well.
Yeah.
It's something that's really important to us. Well, we enjoy it. Number one, we like to talk about all these issues. We think it's a great way to share information. I don't care if plaintiff attorneys or whatever listen to this. They have their podcast. You can go listen. By the way, there's plenty of plaintiff to our audience. If you want to go listen to plaintiff podcasts, I can rattle off a dozen of them right now. I listen to them. It's pretty neat stuff. I think it's interesting because I do think you got to give credit where credit is due. I'm not bashing plaintiff attorneys because, hey, they've done a great job. I tell you what, those folks really know how to communicate information well. They help each other. We're trying to see more of that. More collaboration on the defense side of things. So I think we could take a page from their playbook is to communicate better. I think this is one of the ways that we're trying to do that. We're also having a lot of recent podcasts on attorney growth and development, right? And going from that associate to the partner level, and that partner to senior partner, and types of things that you need to do, mentoring other attorney. There's a lot of good stuff I think we have on this show, and it kind of never gets old. And boy, we're on episode like 140, 141
Something
up there.
like
Hey,
that,
we're
yeah.
approaching 150. Do we do something for 150 special? I think we may have to, because that's probably going to come out right in the new year, right?
Yeah, it's probably shortly after. Yeah, we'll have to put our heads together and figure out something.
Yeah. I think we need to put our heads together for 150 to do something special for the audience. But I thought this was great.
Maybe you can use some of your listener viewer mail that you're getting to find out topics that we haven't covered that we should be covering.
Yeah, I can, and I'll do that as I'm giving speeches and you're giving speeches. I will ask, and we'll get more topics, and we'll get more of that. Yeah, and if you want to be a guest, contact us. We're pretty easy to find. courtroomsciences.com. We'd love to have you on as a guest. And this has been a great episode, Steve. Take it away. Close it out.
Yes, it has been. Hopefully, like I said, we'll come back for another viewer mail, part 4. Until then, this has been another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences.
Sit.